Our next presenter is John Radosta, who teaches English and creative writing at Milton High School just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. A novelist and author of many short stories, he is also a veteran of more than 50 Bob Dylan concerts. He presented on Dylan and Omar Khayyám at the 2023 World of Bob Dylan Conference here in Tulsa, and is the co-author of the book, Bob Dylan in Performance, Song, Stage, and Screen, as well as several book chapters and articles in the Dylan Review and the Asch Journal. Now, I sense a running theme here of Bob Dylan occupying a lot of your attention, but just as if to show that he doesn't monopolize your attention, today he'll be presenting on Woody Guthrie's Lost Rubáiyát recordings.
Good morning. I want to thank everyone for being here, and especially the Asch for publishing the original article that this is based on, and the Grants Committee that made it possible for me to even be here in the first place. I'd also like to thank the Woody Guthrie family and archive, as well as the Smithsonian and Barry Ullman, who all graciously allowed me access to the tapes and materials I'll be discussing this morning. One of Woody Guthrie's myriad unfinished projects is an Okie restyled version of the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám. For many years, only a short fragment of the project has been available on the Smithsonian collection called Hard Travelin', the Asch Recordings Volume 3. However, a series of tape segments, possibly encompassing the entire complete recording sessions, survive. These recordings provide a window to an obscure but exciting departure from Woody's well-known musical travels. While researching Fitzgerald's Rubáiyát for a different project 2 years ago, yes, it was on Bob Dylan, I was allowed to hear digitized versions of the complete recordings, which total about an hour. On them, in no particular order, Woody and Cisco Houston perform about 2/3 of Edward Fitzgerald's translation of Omar Khayyám. The breadth and depth of the recordings, in some cases complete reimaginings or even reversals of Omar Khayyám's philosophies, were stunning. What began as a footnote became a full study. Today, I hope to give you an introduction to Omar Khayyám and his Rubáiyát and Edward Fitzgerald's translation. Next, I'll discuss Woody and Cisco's recordings, including a look at Woody's new language, updating Fitzgerald's Persian meditations for a new mid-20th century audience. And I'll suggest a proper order for the recordings. Omar Khayyám, the astronomer poet, lived in 10th century Persia. In his time, he was best known for his work in algebra and astronomy, and his last name suggests that either he or his ancestors were tent makers. But today, even though his contributions to algebra are still used, not by me, he is best known for having composed an unknown number of short poems. Many were in the 4-line form known as a rubai, the plural is Rubáiyát. Similar in meditative function to the Japanese haiku, Omar Khayyám's Rubáiyát exude an attitude of free thinking and a suspicion of authority, not to mention a deep enjoyment of wine. Because of their religious heterodoxy, it is uncertain which of the hundreds of extant quatrains are actually his, since other poets copied his style and used his name in order to share their own nonconformist and possibly heretical views. The first and best-known English translation by Edward Fitzgerald appeared in 1859. It went through 4 ever-expanding editions until 1879 and inspired the likes of T.S. Eliot and my guy Bob Dylan. Artwork for one of the editions led to the Grateful Dead's most iconic image, and you may even remember Rocky and Bullwinker's adventures with the Rubáiyát of Omar Khayyám. But of course, today it's all about Woody Guthrie. First, the form itself. The structure of an English rubai is similar to a song stanza. It is 4 lines of iambic pentameter in which the first, second, and fourth lines rhyme. In the Persian, they would have been arranged alphabetically by the rhyme, but speaker. During the course of this one day, the speaker awakens to the dawn and enters a tavern. While drinking wine, he meditates on the shortness of life, the unreliable authorities of both religion and science, expressions of love, and wine. It's no surprise that Fitzgerald's poem would be attractive to Woody Guthrie, who first read it in the 1930s and declared Omar a hillbilly for his practical, self-reliant attitudes. The Rubáiyát form closely resembles the ballad form, and its emphasis on individual responsibility over authority imposed from above is also similar to Woody's own philosophy. His personal copy of the poem, a reprint of the shorter 1859 edition, stamped in several places with the radio station call letters KFVD, is owned by a private collector who allowed me a peek over Zoom. I have a copy here of the same edition, very small, pocket-sized. Inside, Woody wrote an original Rubáiyát of his own, dated 1939, and the book is full of Woody's marginal notes, like a conversation with Omar, contrasting Omar's attitude of simplicity with the prevailing greed in Woody's world. And that tension stuck with Woody. In a notebook titled Rubáiyats, and dated June of 1943, he wrote in precise cursive 16 original Rubáiyát, mainly about the invention of unions, as far back as the creation of humanity by a union. That same month, June 1943, Woody set sail with Jim Longy and Cisco Houston on a merchant marine voyage. Longy tells the story of how they set up an impromptu course for a half-dozen Algerians entitled The Meaning of Omar Khayyám and Its Relationship to the Working Class Movement. As their ship prepared to sail, their students, who now had a rudimentary theoretical knowledge of trade unionism, bestowed upon them the name Ben Khayyám to signify that they were sons of the astronomer-poet. Returning home, Woody's post-war songs focused on encouraging people to unite for collective and equal change. He became overtly anti-racist and campaigned against Jim Crow. He wrote several Hanukkah songs and recorded at least one of them. David Amram tells of singing Sephardic songs for Woody, and Ahmed Bashir sang him Muslim prayers in 1956. Given such a wealth of influences, it's no wonder that Woody turned to Omar Khayyám to draw his varied audiences together. Allusions to Fitzgerald can be found in several of Woody's songs. For example, Fitzgerald's line from Rubáiyát 28, I came like water and like wind. The line, we come with the dust and we go with the wind. It's coincidentally a line that Bob Dylan alludes to in his song, Song to Woody, on his very first album. But that's just a random line out of several. However, by the late 1940s, even though his Huntington's disease was beginning to manifest itself, affecting his movements, his reason, even his handwriting, Woody was looking for new projects for Moe Asch on the scale of his Dust Bowl ballads from 1940. One such album, recorded in 1947 and released in 1960, was based on the Sacco and Vanzetti anarchy case from my native Boston, which Woody saw as a unifying topic in post-war America. Then, perhaps remembering the Rubáiyát workshop in Algiers, Woody and Cisco decided to record their own version of Fitzgerald's poem. I came across the one snippet included on the Asch Recordings collection while researching Dylan's use of the poem. When I contacted the Smithsonian to see if there was any more, it turned out that there were in fact 2 tapes, but they had never been digitized or studied, and I may have been the first to hear them since they were recorded. The 2 tapes are not labeled by date, and the sequences are not in any apparent order. The one release take was transferred from a 16-inch acetate on glass disc, so I presume the rest were as well, but I have absolutely no idea. The Smithsonian's Jeff Place, who wrote the liner notes for the Asch recordings, told me he never found any documents on it. He just said that Guthrie wrote Asch lots of letters proposing projects. Woody would come by and record, and Asch would pay him $25 just to help him out. I no longer have access or permission to play the unreleased tapes, but here's a clip from the collection, Woody's revision of Rubáiyát 50, to give you an idea of what the rest sounds like. Oops.
one penny spend to learn the secret of your life, my friend. One little hair divides the false and true, and on that little hair it starts and ends.
The two tapes that contain Woody and Cisco's recordings are in effect mixtapes and contain recordings by other musicians, such as the orchestral dance pieces that are marked at 1A and 1D, which adds to the confusion of how this all came to be. The first tape, at 31 minutes and 1 second, is a compilation of 7 separate recordings, which I've labeled A to G according to the tape number. Each segment runs about 3.5 minutes, on which Woody and Cisco go through a sequence of about half a dozen stanzas each, which I've numbered here according to the sequence in Fitzgerald's 1879 4th edition. The second tape is also made up of 7 segments and runs to 24:55. Like the first, it begins with an orchestra playing dance music, apparently the same one as in 1D, the middle of the previous tape. The segments related to our discussion begin at 2B. 2C is the portion that's been released on the Asch Recordings, Volume 3. Segment 2F, there in bright green, is a separate take of mainly the same stanzas as 2E, purple before it, except one rubai is left out, and Cisco's guitar accompaniment is noticeably slower and more deliberate there. However, because of mistakes in both takes, it's impossible to be sure which was done first and whether the missing rubai was ultimately to be included or not. The last segment presents rewritten versions of 6 more Rubáiyát. That doesn't look right. That looks like 8. Anyhow, the FW labels there refer to the Smithsonian Archives catalog numbers. Taken together, and not including rehearsals and multiple takes, they recorded 58 different stanzas that correspond to about 2/3 of Fitzgerald's 101 Rubáiyát. Each of the sequences covers significant sections of the original, and so it seems that those that were not recorded were deliberately left out. Indeed, the longest series of Fitzgerald's not to be reproduced at all came from a section called the Book of Pots, numbers 82 to 90, which would be difficult to convey musically since it features various drinking vessels, clay cups, disputing religion in many different voices. Only one stanza from this section was recorded by Woody and Cisco. Woody Guthrie's reimagining of Omar Khayyám as a hillbilly is ambitious, but also a novelty, like Bullwinkle's adventure. Some of his revised verses stick to the general theme that Omar set, while others retain only the rhyme scheme. Some make apt modernizations to Omar's imagery, though in many cases the Okie-inflected language serves only to be humorous. It would be impossible to comment on every quatrain, though each is noteworthy in some way. Instead, I'll share a handful that are typical of the whole project. Except for the short segment that's been released publicly, no official lyrics are available, and so quotations are based on my personal transcriptions of the tapes. Not having found any of Woody's writings on the project at the archives, I have not presumed to punctuate or change the spelling of any of the words. Beginnings matter. Fitzgerald's poem opens with a rising sun and a call to action. Wake! For the sun who scattered into flight the stars before him from the field of night drives night along with them from heaven and the Sultan's turret with a shaft of light. It's a promise of adventure, tinted with the Eastern exoticism that was current in both Fitzgerald's and Guthrie's days. But for Guthrie's purposes, Boston, let alone Persia, might have been too easterly, and so he revises his opening to, wake up! The sun has knocked the moon to fly and chased the stars out of his field of night like hobos off their freight train in the dark. He tries to wake your town up with his light. That the sun has knocked the moon to fly adds literal punch to Fitzgerald's translation, introducing a uniquely American swagger to Woody's version. Instead of the exotic imagery of a sultan's minaret, he provides the romantic danger of hobos falling off from boxcars. The lyrics catch the audience's attention, though the performance itself is slow, almost hesitant, as if Woody and Cisco are still trying to find their way into the overall project. If a person knows only one of the Rubáiyát these days, it's likely to be the 12th. The image up here comes from the same edition that gave us the Grateful Dead skeleton. A book of verses underneath the bough, a jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness. O wilderness where paradise enow. Extolling the pure pleasures of a simple life, this quatrain has universal appeal, but would have been particularly encouraging to a Dust Bowl refugee who had survived those hardships through song and meager victuals. Woody's update is homey and erotic, where Fitzgerald Muslim paradise and recast it as a Judeo-Christian Eden, as recalled by This Old Tree. There's a hint of nudity in Your Breast, and the pun on trees and leaves in the final line could refer to the pages of the Book of Songs or the fig leaves that God provided as clothing to the fallen Adam and Eve. In the same way that Omar and Fitzgerald's poem rejects the religious paradise for an earthly one, Woody avoids using Omar's wilderness at all, instead emphasizing the reclining, yet somehow still innocent, lovers with his head on her breast. It retains the glorification of simplicity while updating it entirely for a Western audience. The bit that was released includes Woody's rewrite of Omar's 53rd quatrain. In that one, Fitzgerald emphasizes the shortness of life to convey his carpe diem attitude. But if in vain down on the stubborn floor of earth and up to heaven's unopening door you gaze today, while you are you, how then tomorrow, you when shall be you no more? It led to this version for him and Cisco.
I rolled in pain down on that sawdust floor, the drinking floor. I prayed to heaven to open its golden doors. I groaned and yelled, how long must I here roll here? You must roll here till you are you no more, you no more.
It's been some time since bars had sawdust on the floors, but it's an image from Woody and Cisco's day that I'm sure was all too familiar to them. Because Edward Fitzgerald set a precedent for arranging individual Rubáiyát to accommodate his own narrative agenda, it is possible to arrange Woody and Cisco's jumbled sequences in any order. However, given the general familiarity a mid-20th century audience would have had with Omar Khayyám, it seems likely that the duo intended to replicate Fitzgerald's general scheme. In that case, arranging them would look something like this. First, you have to remove the orchestra entirely, then arranged by Fitzgerald's numbers, which require combining 2B and 1E and 2C. And then choosing between 2E or 2F. Whether or not they recorded in this order is an entirely separate mystery that cannot currently be unraveled. It's not fully clear that these 58 stanzas are the complete vision of the Rubáiyát project. However, given that they rarely skip more than 2 or 3 of the originals, sorry, I missed one, so that's the better slide there. Given that they rarely skip more than 2 or 3 of the originals, it probably is. But even in this order, it's not a coherent project. Each stanza is about 20 seconds long, with varying time between them. In most places, there are about 5 to 10 seconds of guitar and harmonica linking the verses. But on segments 1E, there in the top right, and 2B and 2E, there's almost no space between verses at all. In fact, on 2E, the guitar playing, which is usually a subtle background instrument, becomes forceful, driving the singing from one verse to the next in rapid fire. But the cumulative time for all of these is about 35 minutes. The time makes for a viable album, though the takes are not all complete or correct. Nevertheless, it is clear that Moe Asch was still considering releasing it as late as 1965, as he wrote in a letter of remembrance for Cisco. But the fact is that none of the segments is entirely finished in terms of harmony, musical consistency, or even Woody and Guthrie's agreeing on the words. The take that was released on the Asch Recordings Volume 3, up there in the top right, sounds polished, but in order to keep to Fitzgerald's order, it would have to be interrupted by one incomplete stanza from segment 1E. It would take quite a bit of what Jeff Place calls cleaning up the noise for these segments to become a final product, as I'm sure all of you know far better than I do. It also may have missed its time. By 1950 or so, an American audience might not have been interested in a long-form, non-narrative ballad. Khayyám's meditative quatrains were meant to be taken one at a time, savored and pondered like haiku. Fitzgerald's narrative order, a structure never intended by Omar, already downplays the meditational relevance. Adding guitar and harmonica further distances the listener from the jewel-like quality of the stanzas. And then today, questions of cultural appropriation might also be added to that reluctance. But the sheer brio of the attempt is not to be discounted. The Rubáiyát sessions, no matter their ultimate success or failure, highlight Woody's enduring search for a human union, one of ideas and faiths, an understanding of the similarities that join us all together. Woody and Cisco's collaboration weaves together the revisions of a Victoria-era poem based on the musings of a 10th century astronomer and the post-war idiom of an America on the verge of its own exploration of the stars. It's a multitude of strands of human experience forming a single magic carpet. I'd like to leave you with one last quote from Woody Guthrie. It's from the end pages of his pocket copy of the Rubáiyát. He wrote, "Omar seems to say above everything else, be gay, straighten up your shoulders, be happy, and squeeze the most good out of every minute that you live, even though it be with the most beautiful girl that'll have you beneath the shadiest tree that'll hide you from a flock of neighbors that yell, love, 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 God is love, it all traces back to love." Thank you very much. Do I have time for questions?
Oh, yes, yes, we do.
Or do we save that to the end?
No,
Okay.
let's take some questions now, if we've got them.
No questions. Oh, this is like my 9th grade class. Excellent. Fabulous. Well, I'll be around all week. Thank you very, very much.
I'll throw a question at
Okay.
you. So you've described this very interesting, but as you say, incomplete project where there's these messy recordings that it sounds as though they're not authorized for general release.
Right.
Could you imagine a version of this that could be released that would do some kind of justice to it in its inchoate, incomplete stems? Just wondering what that might look like or sound like.
I would love to hear that. It would sound disjointed. As I said, all of the takes are very, very different from each other. There's no flow to them. But I would love to hear a record that actually went through in the order that I proposed at the end. I think it would be a fantastic document for, I'm an English teacher, so I think it would work for that. It would be a great way to bring music into the classroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A Folkways LP, a jug of wine and thou.